Welcome back everyone to the Stephen Sully Study. I'm at my second home, one of my favourite places, Woodbury House. I've got my next guest with me, Maximillion Cooper. Most people would recognise you as a person from a massive brand that you built, which is called Gumball 3000. So I'm really intrigued about your story, your background, how you got there, and also your profile. I mean, look, without trying to blow smoke at your backside, you're a thoroughbred businessman.
Thoroughbred, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Equated. I mean, look, I've done a little bit of homework, and depending on what publication you look at, some say you're worth 60 million, some say you're worth 80 million. And as a person trying to make a name for myself in business, I'm always intrigued how people got there.
Yeah.
Challenges, setbacks, etc. Then you're married to a fucking rapper, which is unbelievable, which is great. And look, I'm a petrol head, so I'm into my cars. I want to talk to you about cars, etc.
Yeah.
And I just think you're a pretty cool guy. Oh, and more importantly, I want to talk to you about art, because I know you've shared interest in some of the Richard Hamilton stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can talk about that a bit more, and also your art portfolio and your collection and why you got into art. So let's take it from...
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an intro.
Let's take it from the grassroots then. Okay, your background. Like, what is your background, Max?
Yeah, it's nothing fancy. I grew up in, born and bred in England, lived in sort of the north or North Midlands in Staffordshire until I was 10. And then my dad's an artist, so that's the world I've sort of grown up with. And, which is kind of, as a kid, meant parents never had any money because he was a sort of struggling artist my whole childhood. But he actually paid the bills by being an art teacher for a bit. And when I was 10, he got a job teaching art in Gloucestershire, so we moved there. And so I spent my kind of teenage years between Worcester and Cheltenham, basically. And so sort of Worcester is what I sort of consider home. When I go back home now, my parents still live around there. So that was my where I'm from. And then from sort of 17, 18, I moved to London. And spent, now consider London home. Been here since then, but also lived in LA and New York and whatever in that time. But London is home.
Yeah, nice. So I remember when you came over here a few times, you were into your sport, but football, right?
Yeah, I mean, so as a kid, I think, what made me tick was sport and art. Not really art so much back then, thinking about it. It was more kind of, I was sort of naturally good at art, and maybe that was just because my dad's an artist, and I'd probably been, acclimatized to sort of the art world from being born. So really what made me tick throughout my whole kind of, childhood and teenage years was sport, and that's all sport. I loved football. I played every sport that you play at school to a high level. And then kind of when I was sort of about 11 or 12 years old, I got a BMX for Christmas. And that was a sort of a game changer for me as well, because I then kind of spent, the next 4 years sort of BMXing and doing all the tricks and all that. It was when it was huge in England at that time. And that kind of BMX culture was also sort of, moved into almost the skateboard culture as well. And as BMX sadly died out by the time I was sort of 15, 16, we all became skaters, and that skateboard world was very much part of my life, and I did that, for many years. I almost, I sometimes even say now that I still skate, but that's kind of stretching it a little bit, that I'm not on a skateboard very often anymore. But certainly, for a good decade or more, there was a skateboard by the side of me for much of my life. And I think, those worlds were quite different, growing up in Middle England. I think, I like I referenced before that, football was everything to me. I played, I said everything else as well at school. And football was the thing that if you'd asked me when I was a, 10, 11, 12-year-old, what do you want to do when you grow up? I would have said be a footballer. And I played from district to county to Southwest England to trials for different Premier League teams or First Division teams as they were back then. And football was my life. But it was kind of a funny one that I think by the time I was sort of 16, I'd probably had maybe a bit of an overdose of it, playing for multiple teams every week. And it's probably this time when you sort of start exploring the world a little bit more as well. And I think, that skateboard world that I'd kind of also got a passion for was probably my window to the rest of the world. It was kind of, I guess I had this sort of, America was cool and California and, most of those companies came from there and the magazines I'd read, the skaters that you'd see in magazines and whatever, they kind of became heroes and they were all American and if any of them ever came over to England and did a demo or competition or something, everybody over here that was in that world would idolize these guys. And I think, it gave me a taste for sort of that life, wanting a bit of that life. And when I say that life, a bit of maybe that kind of, taste of what Middle England wasn't, going to America and such. And it also kind of, when I look back on it now and everything that I've done sort of in between, it evidently kind of gave me a passion for street culture.
Okay.
And design in that world as well. And then, so like I said before, I moved to London when I was 17. So I finished A-levels and did all right and applied for this college in London called St. Martin's, which is a sort of a famous fashion school here. And I got in, which was pretty amazing, really, because I think there was only 80 of us in the whole year, and it's one of those really hard schools to get into. And I think I was the youngest person to get in as well at the time. So I ended up doing a fashion design degree, and that fashion design kind of came about because, at that age, I didn't know what I wanted to do. That was the honest kind of answer really back then. But like I said, I was good at art and sport. I didn't want to study sport. I'd also kind of almost had a bit of an overdose of doing sport that I kind of felt like I wanted something else. London was exotic and the big city and, parties and girls and whatever it was. And I was seduced by coming to London. And so I didn't want to do fine art as a degree. I never saw myself or wanted to become an artist, but I did like design.
Yeah.
And so I guess the question was almost at that point, did I look to do a sort of, I never really wanted to do graphic design. It was more sort of back then maybe thinking about fashion or even architecture.
Yeah.
And anyway, getting into St. Martin's, it was like I said, a big deal at the time. So I went with that, and that's what brought me here.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So when I look at successful people, organisations, I'm always very, very intrigued, obviously about their business journey, but before then, what was their school life like? Were they academically clever? Did they take to school? Were they a bit of a rebel? And what you said, interestingly enough, there is it was actually kind of sport, but the skateboarding, which was your gateway into like the creative kind of maybe mindset that you've got.
Definitely into that creative kind of mindset.
And I think there's a bit of a kind of lesson now. Like for me, when I was back at school, I'm 35 next month, and I think school now is slightly different, some of the messages, than it was back then. And I've got to be honest, I was at a school where they said to me, couple of people said this to me, teachers said, if you don't qualify in, all your GCSEs, etc., you're basically going to become a failure. And that kind of drove me. But I feel that if you're not academically clever, or even if you are, stimulating yourself through sport and creative means, I think can open your eyes to another world. And I think your skateboarding one just then signifies that.
Yeah, I think it's what you kind of, it's what you're exposed to as a child as well, or as a teenager, that can kind of motivate you to do well. Outside of the academic, kind of the 10 or so subjects you study at school, which most of them don't motivate people at all. So it's what kind of motivates you beyond that. And like you said, that skate world, but also the sports world. And I guess I just have, you've got to have a little bit of a kind of something inside you that's a desire or a passion to do well at something. Yeah. And also I had wherever it came from, probably came from parents, but I had a kind of a desire to travel and explore and see the world. And like I said, my school was a very, very average, state school called the Hill Junior High, you know, that closed as well when we were 16 or so, and went to another school for then called Hanley Castle, and did a couple of years there, and then I did actually probably the Hill closed when I was probably 14 and went to Hanley, and then I actually did GCSEs there, did pretty good at them. I was always sort of fairly, I wouldn't say I was really academic, but you know, I did all right at most subjects, particularly the kind of the arts, history, geography, English, and I said like art itself and whatever, but terrible at maths and physics and the sciences, like really just appalling at those. And I've been appalling at maths ever since as well, you know, and that just, it's not for me. But I moved from that school to go to a sixth form college,
right, to
do A levels. And, you know, when I look back on my school, it's kind of funny that, you know, even though I say it's pretty average, it's in the countryside. Almost sort of, it was this school that kind of had a huge radius of probably, I don't know, sort of 15, 20 miles all around it that the kids came from.
Yeah.
And you know, most families, which you don't think about at the time, but most families were sort of in maybe agricultural world. It was quite rural. So, you know, it was sort of, it was what it was. And most people left at 16 and went and worked for their families, or they became builders or whatever. And even at that school, not even the sixth form college, but even at my school, which did have a sixth form, out of a school of, I don't know, 800 people or something, there were probably only like 20 or 30 that stayed on to do A levels.
Yeah.
And out of those, probably only 10 of them went to uni. So it was really low. It was really kind of not something that was even kind of, you know, it wasn't pushed upon you. You kind of, I almost feel looking back on it, you weren't even informed about it. I don't even think I knew about university almost, and I think I went to this Worcester sixth form college because Worcester was like the local town. A few of my mates that I played football for the same team for, they were going to this college as well, and you know, Worcester was the big city in the area, you know, so it was kind of like it was good to go there, and I think that motivated me as well to kind of want to go and do a degree. But like I said, at the time, I still was sort of, you know, I didn't have a career route. I didn't know what I was going to do. I think the most positive thing for me was that I really did enjoy the creative worlds. And like I said, from design to photography to kind of art itself to kind of anything that had a bit of an element of creativity, and music, the crossover with music really is there. I loved that world. I just want to be part of that world. And so I remember coming down to St. Martin's for an interview. And I don't know if you know anything about St. Martin's. The funny thing is, it's actually around the corner from here. It was on Charing Cross Road.
Right.
And so this was the area this bit of Soho was where I kind of hung out for a few years when I was there. But it was a very different kind of university. That it wasn't really a university. You know, it was a very old building, steeped in kind of history in the art world, and with a big kind of bar canteen called Dave's Bar in there. And the day I kind of go for an interview, there's Mick Jagger is in there, and it's just like, you know, quality. How, why, what kind of thing, you know, what is this place? And I think at the same time I'd visited some other unis just to have a look at them that were normal, kind of a continuation from school and just a campus, kind of a normal thing. And this place that sort of had a taste of in London was so different. And you know, when I was there, I sort of it was one of those places that I think it was very, very loose in its sort of what it actually taught you, but what it kind of did instill somehow, I don't quite know how they did it, but they kind of instilled a real element of competition between everyone that was there, that everybody wanted to do well. Whereas I kind of felt like other friends that were going to uni to do other subjects, they didn't care about doing well. They were just having a laugh. They were just enjoying the social time, the whatever. Yeah. This place, like I said, it was only 80 people in each year. And one of my tutors there was John Galliano, who's a famous fashion designer. And I'm in the same year, same class as people like Alexander McQueen, who obviously we're just all mates at the time. Nobody knows he's going to go on to be one of the biggest
Superstar.
designers in the world, and a head of Gucci and everything, you know. And there were several others: Giles Deacon, Luella Bartley, Stella McCartney. We're all there at the same time. So, but you know, like I said, none of us at that point knows that any of us are going to go on to do anything. But you could tell that people were motivated and talented.
Had that energy for it.
They had the energy for it completely, and they were sort of passionate about that world that they were in. And I had a very different experience sort of even of St. Martin's and that fashion world, because I kept sport going with me all the time. So to backtrack a little bit, so when I was sixth form, A-levels time, I started playing table tennis. And this is a side story for you, but I started playing table tennis, and there was a girl at sixth form that was very good who played for England schoolboys team, England schools team. And, within probably about a year, I could beat her. And I started entering competitions and the local county or, area tournaments, and I started winning them. And then I played in the nationals, and I started winning those. And this was all in the space of like 2 years of doing A-levels. That by the end of that, doing A-levels and leaving there, I'm winning national tournaments and sort of playing in sort of England youth, internationals even and stuff. And it sounds really crazy because I did it because I loved it, and it obviously came very natural to me. But it actually meant that almost that playing table tennis, as bizarre as it sounds, was my kind of forkway in life, that I stopped playing football to play table tennis almost, because tournaments and football matches were falling on the same day, and I had to choose what I wanted to do. And then I'd play in this table tennis tournament because I was just winning, and it was amazing, And then I'd be kind of pissing off my, coaches and teammates because I was sort of almost letting them down at that point. But like I said, I'd at that point in life of being sort of 16, 17, I was probably playing a match for the college, a match for my Sunday team, a match for the district team, a match for the county team every week, every other week, and it was just too much. I think I kind of wanted to escape it. And like I said, I still got this other kind of passion that none of the other friends of mine that were footballers had, which was that skateboard world. Because skateboarding was really kind of almost, it wasn't cool then at all. Not that it is now, but it's sort of, if you're into kind of football, you weren't into skateboarding.
Totally different demographic.
Totally different kind of types of people. And somehow I could kind of enjoy them both. And I think, anyway, so moving on. So I kind of, that's almost sort of, I had to make that decision then. I either would sort of think, you know what, I'm going to give it my all, and I'm going to go and play for one of these football league teams that want to sign me, which like teams like Aston Villa and, some big teams in the Midlands. Do I go and sign on with them and see how it goes? Do I keep playing table tennis? Do I go skateboarding? Do I move to London? And I moved to London. That was the sort of the choice. And I think, I was definitely kind of wanting to get out of that small town environment, and I said explore the world, and that first stepping stone was moving to London, really. And then this takes you on the rest of my journey of how it kind of the next decade before Gumball came about was. So I moved to London, and it was actually probably even this. I basically get asked to model for an agency, first of all, that was doing talent scouting. And actually, I got asked to sort of shoot for this agency and stuff whilst I was still at sixth form college. So, whilst I was still in Worcester. So I guess even that, they were based in London, called Elite Premier. They were one of the big ones, and you go there kind of, their little model office in London to see them. And, you're like 17 out from the countryside in London, and you're looking in this room, and there's all supermodels on the wall, and and it's sort of the same agency at the time represented everyone from Naomi Campbell to Claudia Schiffer and everyone that was big back then. And that was another reason to bring me to London, sort of thing. So that was also a taste of the fashion world. So I think even just before I started St. Martin's, I'd started to be, in a few fashion shoots, and been asked to model in a few runway shows, some catwalk shows for some different brands. And probably within sort of 6 months of doing that and then moving to London, I got a few jobs that paid me really, really well. Having, never really had a lot of money to note. I say not a lot of money to note. Another thing to throw into the mix, I'd probably worked since the age of 12 on a building site. Every weekend, even on weekends where I got football, I'd work half a day in the afternoon, and every holiday, whatever, I'd work on a building site. So I'd always had a bit of money. That was where, gave me the flexibility to kind of enjoy life like that, but anyway, moving to London and getting asked to model for some brands. And
was that by chance, the modelling thing, or did you apply?
No, it was completely by chance. So it was basically, at the time, there was a TV show on in England called The Clothes Show.
Right.
And they ran a models competition. And they scouted around the area, and they went to different schools and colleges, and they picked a few people. And they picked a few people to just have just a single photo, essentially. And those people they liked, they asked if they wanted to come to London and be a model kind of thing, and have a photo shoot, essentially, a proper one, and take it from there, and you never know if you're going to get any jobs, whatever. But in my sixth form college, I think there were 2 or 3 of us that got asked, and
well, that must have done wonders for your confidence. I mean, you're a confident guy, but
yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's one of those things that I don't think you, you certainly never kind of think of wanting to model or anything, but when you get asked, it's kind of flattering, right? So,
of course.
So so like I said, I mean, I moved down here, doing more photo shoots, test shoots, whatever, a few magazine editorial stuff that doesn't really pay, and a few runway shows, and it got me out there. And then I ended up doing sort of photo shoots for Giorgio Armani and for Ralph Lauren and
big names,
some big names, and it paid me some really big money. It paid me in the sort of the thousands or tens of thousands, and again, I'm only 17, probably turn 18 that year or something, and I'm getting paid in one shoot maybe more than some friends who've left school are earning in the year, and it was amazing. I can't deny it. It was incredible, So, so what did I do with that money? Well, I spent it wisely on, as if I hadn't tried to cram in enough things in my life already by this point. The one thing I'd never, ever had the chance to do, and it was the other passion of mine as a kid always, was be a racing driver. I'd never had to go in a racing car. I'd never done karting or anything. And my dad doesn't even drive a car. And my mum has a Morris Minor, so I'd never even had a nice car in my life or seen one almost in the flesh. But, as a kid, I used to watch Formula One. James Hunt was a bit of a hero in the 70s and 80s, and Senna and whatever. And I thought, I got a ton of money in my account. Well, a decent amount of money in my account from modeling. What am I going to do with it? I did a racing driver's course. So I went and did, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? I mean, like I said, I guess I've probably always had that sort of outlook without analyzing it until you sit down and do stuff like this, that I want to live life, give it a go. Let's try it, So back then I wanted to race cars, and I think I probably met a couple of people that were doing it or in that world, and certainly through the fashion world, all of a sudden in a very short space of time, I moved from rural small town Worcester to London, in the fashion world, going to every cool club and, hanging out with every famous model and musician and whoever goes to nightclubs kind of thing. I mean, I even remember, I know we're sidetracking now, but I remember coming to London, inviting friends to come and stay with me in London when I was probably turning 18. And I took them out. It's like, this is like my first few months in London probably, and I took them out to the cool clubs and whatever. And one of the club owners invited me, because he invited lots of the models, work with the model agencies and whatever, to kind of host my birthday party and a table and all that sort of stuff. That you don't get that in countryside, champagne bottle service tables, vodka. You don't get that, you're rural, small time kind of, nightclubs and whatever. And my birthday, coincidentally, I share with Prince. It's the 7th of June, and Prince was in London playing Wembley at the time. So my birthday and my table and Prince's table are next to each other in this club. And it's like, oh my God, and I'm with like 6 mates from Worcester that have probably only ever been to London once before. And I think a couple of them had come to London as well, not only to see me, but they were going to the Prince concert at Wembley.
I bet it absolutely blown away.
And, we're sat and Prince invites me to join him and his crew. And I mean, it was just like, you can imagine what a game changer in terms of sort of 6 months before I'm in,
Your friends must have thought you an absolute G.
I mean, it was kind of just almost surreal, you're just sort of thrown into this world, but thrown into that world was also, it was almost thrown into this world of access to people.
Yeah.
And access to this kind of, this fun lifestyle, I guess, and surrounded by people that were inspiring to me as well, whether they were people you're seeing in magazines at the time or on TV or, and suddenly I'm here having drinks with them and you get to know them really at these events because you kind of do, you get the same invites, you kind of do one party to the next and whatever. And anyway, so, I think I'd probably come into contact, which I had back then with a few racing drivers at some of these parties. And I think it just got into my mindset that I wanted to have a go at racing cars. And I looked it up how much it was to do this driving course at Donington Circuit and I went and did it. It was probably like a 2-week course and gives you all the basics. And at the end of it, you do your first race and you apply for your racing driver's license. And that sort of, this was about 1990. And then so from 1990 to about 97, I raced every year.
What was you racing?
The most basic, not boring actually, the most basic simplified Formula One cars called Formula Ford or Formula Vauxhall Junior to begin with. They're sort of single-seater racing cars, open wheel. And I raced those for the first probably
a bit of a big wing at the front, flat.
Some of them.
And quite pointy.
I mean, basically Formula One cars, but not as powerful. Yeah. Like the smaller down, scaled down version of a Formula One car at the time, I guess.
And I imagine back then the technology is far different to what it is today. So was it manual?
Oh, it was manual, and it was your foot on the clutch, and you kind of, you
quite dangerous little things actually, maybe.
Really dangerous little things. When you think back to it, there's sort of, you kind of the adrenaline when you're sort of putting your foot on the clutch, even for a start of a race. Your leg gets the shakes where it's sort of like shaking up and down because you're just so pumped and adrenaline and nervous and and yeah, I mean, I had some incredible races and loved it, loved every minute of it. And then I raced like 3 or 4 years, well, probably 2 or 3 years of those sort of cars. And then I got drives for different teams in mostly sports cars. So like Porsche Super Cup was one of the races that I raced in, which was actually amazing because the Porsche Super Cup series was actually at different Formula One weekends at the Formula One races around Europe. So, on either that Saturday or Sunday of a Formula One race, I was one of the support races, which was great. And again, it's in front of crowds and proper teams and whatever and stuff. So essentially, I did 3 years of St. Martin's, doing a bit of fashion design, going out a lot, doing a few fashion shoots and racing cars. And
I mean, look, we haven't even got to the meaty parts, but I'm already inspired. I mean, you're basically James Bond. I mean, you're model, art connoisseur almost. Yeah. There's a list of different things, but look, on a serious point, the 3 takeaways is you moved to London, and for me, look, I'm not let's say a self-help guru, but what I like to portray on my podcast, I'm hoping that a younger demographic listens to the episodes and interviews and they get some inspiration. And I always say that if you change your environment, you're going to get different results. So you moved to London. That was number 1, the first takeaway. The second one was, it was almost like you were saying, follow something you're passionate about and you get excited about. Because when you wake up in the morning, it's not work, it's a passion.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then I think the last one that you said, which I loved, was live life. And you just jumped into racing car driving. And I think that really sums up life, isn't it? You need to change your environment. You need to follow something you're passionate about and live life. Take calculated risks.
You know what? You get you know, obviously we all grow up in different walks of life, different finances, different everything. But I think you've sort of, if you've grown up in a sort of, let's say a country like Great Britain, you know, you haven't grown up in a third world environment, really. Of course, there's vast, you know, variance of wealth, and there's some much, you know, poorer communities. But there are chances that you've got to take, and you've got to get yourself in those places, I think. And you've got to kind of be ballsy enough to kind of maybe get yourself out of that environment that you're in if you don't like it.
Manifest your own opportunities.
You do. I think you really do. And it doesn't mean to say that things are always going to work out okay.
No.
But you've got to give it a go. Or else you sort of, you know, I think you find, you know, certainly when you sort of pass 40 in age, you sort of realize that life is pretty short, you know, and time flies. And I you know, I look back and I see some friends of mine that you know, some people I just went to school with or whatever, that still live in that area and still do what they did when they left school, sort of thing. And it doesn't mean to say that's wrong, and maybe they enjoy doing that. Not everybody is going to have the same sort of motivation to kind of get out and do everything, but there's definitely kind of others that probably think, I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd kind of had that chance. And sometimes I think they probably did, they just didn't take it.
I have the same conversation with my wife. I say to her, it doesn't matter how much money that you equate. If you are born in one area, you live and work in that area, and then you suddenly die in that area, is that really living? Even if you've got like billions of pounds to your name? Maybe for some people, and look, there's no right or wrong way to live life. Everyone's got their own different things that stimulate them, and different goals and everything else. But for me, I want to recap on my life at a certain point after I've built a few businesses and I've ticked off some of those goals. I want to go around the world and, you know, live in different parts of the world for a proportion of my life. And I think that gives you, I think the definition of being rich is not just about financial, it's about everything. The wellness, the travel, the education, the social aspect. I think it's so important. So going into what you're known for.
But on that note, let me just say just quickly that, you know, the funny thing is that, like I said at the start, so, you know, my parents came from very kind of, you know, my dad's dad, they worked in, I mean, both superheroes and grandparents, that they were in the Second World War and pilots and amazing, you know. But, you know, outside of that horrible kind of situation of war that they're all thrown into, they worked in normal jobs. You know, they worked in a factory, or, you know, my mum and granddad was a policeman for a bit, you know, and it was just like normal life. And my parents were born into that. And, you know, my mum worked as a secretary, and my dad was the rebel that was the one that kind of didn't want to follow that family route and just join the rest of them that all worked in a factory in Wolverhampton. You know, he was the rebel that kind of had some creativity and became an artist.
Blazed his own trail.
Yeah, but also, you know, wasn't afraid to kind of take that risk that he didn't have an income coming in.
Yeah.
And we lived a very, very, when I look back on it, it's a very humble life that, you know, we didn't have, even in the normal state school environment, that we didn't have TVs and stuff, and we did that, you know, didn't have a car or whatever. But I think, you know, my parents are still alive now. They're still together. My dad's still painting every day. They're amazing. And what they've had over the years is a really rich life, because they've sort of been able to do what they've wanted to do. And you know, and over the years, Dad has thankfully, over, you know, the last few decades, you know, he's got more popular with his artwork, and people buy it, so they've got some more money and whatever. But really, they were the ones that really kind of weren't scared to kind of go against the grain. And it didn't matter to them that they didn't have any money. And I think that kind of came through with me as well, that it, like you just said, it's not about the money. It's about your own outlook on life and what you want to kind of, how you want to experience this life, essentially.
Yeah, for sure. So when I was younger, I said this to you a few times now, I always looked at this Gumball rally on TV, and I was obsessed with cars. I was like M3s, Porsche Turbo, Ferraris, all that kind of stuff. And I was always either, trying to go on looking at magazines like Max Power and things like that.
Yeah.
I know there was, can't remember the guy's name now, from Essex, who used to do up the cars.
Okay.
Jay, someone was it? It was almost like a recreation of the one they had in America, which was, name escapes me now. West Coast Customs. It was an English version.
Yeah.
And he was like the cool dude.
Yeah.
And then now, obviously, you got people like Yanni and everybody else.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I always said, I really want to do that when I'm older.
Yeah.
And obviously now connecting with you is fantastic, because it looks like me and my business partner, we're going to be doing it for the first time next year in America. So I'm really, really pumped by it. But so anyway, this brand now, it's not just the Gumball Rally, it's more than that. But when did you kind of discover that you had this entrepreneurial kind of gene? Like when did that kick in?
I think, I guess giving you the sort of the short story, let's say, of how it came about, I carried on throughout the 90s, like I said, by juggling kind of that fashion world and the sort of the racing cars and I mean, to throw something else, which I don't know, it sounds, when I finished my fashion design degree, I did a law degree, which sounds
this guy's
ridiculous,
full of so many credentials.
Well, 3-year degree.
Yeah.
It's still early 90s. I don't really know what I want to do.
Yeah.
I'm still racing. I'm still earning some money through modeling. I don't want to kind of stop doing that, but really modeling and racing cars and skating and whatever and stuff. It's not every day of the week, and races were like, maybe 2 a month, and that's seasonal as well, So, and same with fashion shoots. It might only be sort of, 3-4 days a month, if that's some months of actually doing that.
Yeah.
So what do I do? So I kind of had a bit of a kind of a sort of almost rebellion to myself, or just a kind of a challenge to myself, that I, at the time, because my life had been so different to all of my mates from the age of sort of 17 to 21, so different, I missed a bit of normality. And a part of me wanted to kind of get out of London at that time and sort of play football again. And, because suddenly I'd gone from sort of, like I said, football almost being a career to basically not playing it at all within a year. And, then I had 3 years of not playing it whatsoever. So I really missed it. And so I came out of St. Martin's and thought, you know what? I may as well do another degree, because they're pretty easy in the sense of, it's 3 10-week terms a year.
Yeah.
I can manage the workload with everything else that I'm doing as well. But what do I want to do? And I think at that point, I really kind of, like I said, I wanted to just sort of play football again and that kind of stuff. So I actually thought, I'm going to go to a normal uni and experience that, because I felt like I'd missed out on what those other friends are doing. Even though it may sound ridiculous, because all those other friends are thinking, my life must be like insane now, and I'm flying all around the world and whatever. But as strange as it was, I sort of missed that a bit. So anyway, I can't quite recall why I decided to do law, other than the fact that everything about my life from being born to that point was creative and artistic and sporty. It was all the art world, was all the things, and especially then having just finished St. Martin's, and friends were now heads of different big fashion brands, and all the people I got to know through modeling as well. It was all fashion world. I wanted to kind of almost rebel against that and do something really normal, but a challenge. And I think I was sort of intrigued by those worlds that I didn't know. I didn't know anything about banking at all. I didn't know how anyone would work in the city, what it was. I didn't know anything about being a lawyer or a barrister, or what that world was whatsoever, and it sort of intrigued me. And then what I would say is that I'd had sort of 3-4 years at this point of racing cars, and even a little bit before racing cars, even as a sort of 15-16-year-old, I got sponsored to do skateboarding. And not, when I say sponsors, very small, like it was almost getting like free sneakers and free clothes, shirts from brands and stuff, but it was still like dealing with a bit of a contract with that brand. And then with the racing cars, I I had to raise money to race. I paid a lot through the money I was earning through modeling, but I also got sponsorship deals as well. And I actually managed to get sponsors to pay, to sponsor me that were from the fashion industry. So one of my sponsors back then was the fashion brand called Diesel. And I got to know the owner of Diesel, and I modeled in their shows and in their adverts, and I got them to sponsor me racing. And so I'm dealing with contracts, and I'm having to kind of interact with lawyers for the first time, really. And, reading through these contracts about what I've got to do and what they've got to do. And I thought they were all right. I could understand them okay, and thought it's kind of interesting. And I'd paid probably, what I considered back then, which is probably a lot of money at the time, a huge fee to this law firm to do these contracts,
Yeah.
So that maybe kind of like was why I kind of got sort of something in my head about doing a law degree. And anyway, I applied to do a law degree at a couple of different unis. One of them was at University of Sussex, which is just outside Brighton.
Okay.
And I got in, and I thought, why not? I never lived in. I mean, I did a 3-year degree there, got a law degree. I never lived the normal Sussex, University of Sussex student life. That I kept a flat in London. Mm-hmm. I got a Porsche Turbo and a Lotus Esprit cars at the time, and an Alfa Romeo and probably something else as well. And you turn up to uni in a Porsche Turbo or something, it's kind of a little bit different anyway.
Yeah. Very much.
But I also thought, I think probably, when I went into that and just went in as a normal undergraduate student and did a normal, normal first degree in law, I guess I maybe brought something to that equation from the experiences that I'd had already. And I actually wanted to do well again. I was there to kind of learn it actually. I didn't sort of take part in, I guess, normal student life there, because it really, when I did, I'm sort of thinking, take me back to London, take me back to New York, take me back to Milan or wherever it was I'd been for the last 3-4 years, partying, and think, do I really want to be a student again, sort of thing. But anyway, I did it. I didn't, despite probably thinking about dropping out a couple of times, I carried on, and I finished it. And so I finished that in about 1996, 97.
Okay.
And around that time, 97-ish, 97, 98, I'd been racing cars for about 7 years then, and I sort of thought, I'm not going to be world champion at this, and I'm not really wanting to model anymore. What do I want to do? I've had almost, 7 years of that world, of kind of just discovering what I want to do and playing in the fashion world and playing as a racing driver. What do I want to do? And I think what I wanted to do was try and make an impact in the worlds that I enjoyed. And I can only describe it as that at the time. And what that impact would be, so that kind of came to me at that point, that the team I was racing for in 1996, 97, the team owner was a very, very wealthy Scottish guy, millionaire, multi-millionaire. Don't think we had billionaires back then, but he was as close as you probably could be. And he made all his money in hedge funds and banking, and obviously cars were his passion. But I also kind of sort of, we'd hang out with the other guys in the team and everything. And I'd probably show them this fashion scene in London and the party scene in London, which when you were in that little bubble of it, was where every rock star and film star and whatever was partying and stuff, even to a kind of very successful millionaire from the finance world, he didn't really have access to that. So I sort of showed them a kind of a new world, really, that was kind of exciting to them. And anyway, I guess I had this sort of idea that I had followed, obviously, for this last decade quite closely and sort of been part of the periphery of it, this Formula One world, and got friends that were now drivers in Formula One teams, and because I've been racing in this sort of the lower ranks of it, and I'm sort of seeing that world and loving being the driver and the excitement of a race weekend and everything. But then I'm also got this fashion world going on, and the sort of, I keep calling it fashion, but it's a bit of a blur for me across kind of fashion, music, street culture, art world as well, really. I got that world going on over there that was much more creative and exciting in a different way. And I actually it came to me in the sense that I thought, you know what, I'm going to some parties some nights a week. I think I probably even referenced one at the time that was, I went to some party that BMW hosted that was really, really boring, and they'd probably spent millions on it. You know, it was corporate. Everything was probably so well organized that it was not fun.
Yeah.
And probably the
bit too stiff
and just corporate, you know, just the wrong crowd of people there, even everything, you know, it was just sort of, you know, boring basically. But they'd spent loads of money, and they had loads of money. And then probably the next day or later that week, I'd go to a fashion world party that had no money. Whoever was party it was probably had zero money, but it was a brilliant party and a really good time and really creative and interesting characters and people. And I wanted to just throw them all together to kind of rock up this boring corporate world over here and give it a bit of the color of this world over here that for some reason they hadn't met at this point.
Yeah.
And so I had this idea to create at the time what would have been, well, we tried to buy a Formula One team, which I wanted to buy a Formula One team and make it the most rock and roll, sexy, you know, wild Formula One team that would rock up the Formula One world, that would kind of just be disruptive really in the industry. And I kind of thought that, you know, having, you know, a knowledge of sort of the history of racing and Grand Prix and Formula One, that really from the time sort of racing began in the early kind of 20th century, the Bentley boys and Le Mans and the racing drivers right through the decades, right up to the sort of 70s really of the James Hunt sort of era, they were all real playboys and jet set. And, you know, there's stories of, you know, drivers pulling into the pit lane and having a cigarette and then carrying on, or even having a glass of champagne or something and carrying on. And you know, obviously the sport was increasingly professional over the years and stuff like that was not going to happen. But it was increasingly taking away the characters and the personality of the sport, I thought. And so anyway, with the money of this team owner that I drove for, I tried to buy a team called Tyrrell, which was a very successful English Formula One team that in the early 70s had been the team that Jackie Stewart had raced for. But by the late sort of 1990s, it was not that successful. And the owner of that team, Ken Tyrrell, was probably in his sort of late 60s, early 70s now. And it was at a time when that team was sort of, you know, about to either close or be bought by someone. And so it was the prime kind of opportunity to buy this team as cheap as we could and turn it into what we wanted and bring a bit of this glamour and sex appeal back and just a bit of fun to the sport. Anyway, it was at the time when I found myself bidding to buy this team and negotiating and whatever, and I'd got up to £15 million to buy this team. Of not my money, but you know,
raised it. Yeah,
this team owner that I drove for was willing to kind of go up to that much to buy it, and it got to the point, and I'm sort of, what am I at this point? I'm sort of about 27 years old or something like that, and I'm in this room buying a Formula One team, you know, which was really crazy and
very ballsy.
But I think I just got I got such a vision of what I wanted to do with it that people were sort of believed it, you know, and wanted to believe it and would support it, which was amazing. And anyway, at that time, it was announced, or around that time, it was announced that Formula One was going to ban cigarette advertising in the sport.
Okay.
And I think they put a 5-year time frame on it that, you know, in 5 years' time, cigarette advertising is going to be banned. So all of a sudden, all the cigarette companies suddenly spent more money in that period to kind of just get their brands out there. And so British American Tobacco, which was owns several cigarette brands, but one of them being Lucky Strike, they decided to buy a Formula One team, and they came and offered Ken Tyrrell tens of millions more than we'd offered to buy Tyrrell Formula One team. So I lost that team. You know, it didn't happen, and it became the BAR Honda Formula One team, the one that Jenson Button became world champion with.
Wow.
But for me, what it did was, this was all going on in sort of 1998 for me, roughly. And I'd say what it did was, in this period of me sort of having this idea to create this team and then buy a team, I was getting everyone I knew involved. You know, whether it was friends that I'd got that were now, you know, successful musicians, fashion designers, supermodels, racing drivers, skateboarders, everyone I knew, I was getting them hyped on what I was trying to create, and they were all excited by it and really supportive of it, and you know, wanted to be part of it as well. And so essentially, when we didn't get this team, I was like, you know, fuck, what do we do? I've got all this sort of passion and energy from everyone, but I've got nothing to do with it. Where do I take it? So it's where Gumball came about. So I thought, you know what? I've got all these people interested. Instead of just sort of telling them about something I want to do, let's show them and give them something to actually do. And so I thought, I'll organize a road trip where they all can all bring their own car, and we'll drive around Europe, and we'll do a party every night, and all the rock star friends and, you know, music friends that I got would play at the parties, and it'd be a week long, and it'd be this cool road trip. And if it was a good event, good road trip experience or whatever, good parties, I kind of felt like I could keep my dialogue going with them all, because I'd shown them something that I could actually do something, instead of just telling them about an idea of a racing team. So it's how Gumball came about. So I literally invited 50 odd friends to drive on this first Gumball rally around Europe. And that was April 1999. We did that. And, you know, sort of almost the rest, as I say, is sort of history, you know, that these 50 odd cars, 110 people, a great eclectic mix from the likes of Chris Eubank driving his Peterbilt truck through to, you know, elite premium model agency entering cars of supermodels to, I don't know, Jason Priestley, if you remember him from Beverly Hills 90210.
Right, yeah.
He's someone I'd raced cars with, because that was his sort of, apart from him being an actor, he's a aspiring racing driver as well back then. And so, you know, he was my co-driver. And it was just a mix of kind of people like Jamiroquai, JK.
Yeah, he's a massive car fanatic, isn't he?
You know, and so I'd probably got, you know, 10 to 20 celebrities taking part in it. Danny Minogue, Kylie Minogue, you know, all the people that were kind of, I was out partying with at the time, and had kind of got hyped on me buying this Formula One team. They're the ones that all came and drove on this little trip around Europe. And you know, I guess to put it into perspective of its sort of success, there was not much to kind of measure it on. Like, there were no fans back then. There was no one watching this. It was just 55 cars driving around Europe for 6 days, with staying at nice hotels and great parties every night. But I'd got the fashion world contacts involved, which is fashion media, you know, the likes of GQ and Esquire and FHM and whatever. And some of them were sent photographers and a few journalists to kind of cover it. And so, you know, everyone who took part in it really loved it and wanted me to organize another one. So that was one kind of, like, I guess, seal of approval. But then by sort of September of that year, August, September, when all the magazine coverage started coming out, in 1 month, I think we got the cover of GQ, FHM, Maxim, Autocar, Car. Like, in 1 month, we got the cover of all of them, sort of thing, you know. And suddenly that was almost my, you know, the level of success that first one had to give me some sort of feedback on it.
Yeah.
And really kind of like, that was the thing that also sort of pushed me to think, you know what, my route to having an impact in the car world, but also the fashion world and all the things that I was into, was through this. You know, let me build this, what I've called it Gumball 3000. Let me, you know, it was never about being a one-off car rally. It was about building a brand out of it.
Yeah.
So it was about sort of thinking, you know what, that rally went really well. I will organize another rally, because that rally allows me to get all my sort of celebrity friends involved and help build it, you know, and you know, but it wasn't easy. It didn't, you know, I'm giving you the kind of the highlights of those sort of that first year. And there were some big highlights, but behind the scenes, I was, you know, I hadn't budgeted properly. I owed a load of money after that first one. I probably sort of was almost also forced into doing the second one to help pay off the first one. But at the same time, there was so much sort of excitement about it that had to just do it. I could just see that this was my route to kind of, bigger and better things, essentially.
So
I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you have. I mean, I've even forgot the question because I was so pulled into it. So most people, if they're listening to this, they will know what Gumball Rally is. But some people have a misconception because even I thought for many years it's a race.
Yeah.
And it's sort of not. It's not. Well, it's not. It's like now when I part of the reason why I'm going to enter it. Number one, I love cars.
Yeah.
Number two, I love traveling.
Yeah.
But three, if I'm being deadly honest with you, I love networking. I love connecting with like-minded people that. It doesn't have to be about business, but I like to stimulate my own brain.
Yeah, of course.
Hence why I like to have a conversation like this, because I can think about other things.
Yeah.
What is Gumball Rally? If you were to just give me a 1 minute pitch on it, like what is it?
I've gone to the days of me doing a pitch on it, unfortunately. But essentially, what the rally is itself is probably something I've already sort of mentioned already. But the rally itself is a straightforward drive from A to B every day over 6 days, and over those 6 days we cover 3,000 miles approximately, and approximately now 100 cars take part every year, and it's a who's who from around the world. Every year now is about 30 to 40 different nationalities of entrant. I like to keep it as kind of slightly as sort of wacky races as possible, so it's like you reference, it's not about racing. I mean, I'd equally be as excited if someone enters a 1960s Ferrari as much as if they entered a brand new one. But of course, if you are racing, then the old one is not going to win, but not even Ferraris and whatever. I mean, people bring, it could be old American muscle cars, it could be proper vintage cars, it could be a tricked out Honda. It doesn't really matter. It's about, a lot of cars reflect people's personalities and characters as well.
Definitely.
So it's a real, if you've ever seen the cartoon, The Wacky Races, Dick Dastardly and Penelope Pitstop and whatever. Yeah. I don't know if you have, because it was a thing of the 70s. But Gumball is a real life Wacky Races. It's a road trip. That on that road trip we share an incredible journey together. All 200, 300 people that are on it, and now as it's grown over the years, it's sort of almost become a sort of a rolling festival. So in every city that we go to en route, we put on music concerts and car shows, and now the fans come out in their tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, in every city. Yeah. And so and now it's sort of very much organized. That sort of, we close city centers, we close Times Square, Regent Street, Piccadilly Circus, to the Eiffel Tower, Tiananmen Square in Beijing, and really kind of, like I said, put on almost a one-night festival in every city that it goes to, and the route is different every year. And in the last sort of 20 years, we've covered much of the world, really. Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of a to sum it up, it's a once in a lifetime experience in a road trip, and it's something that if anyone ever does, I hope they remember it for the rest of their lives. It's that week, and I think. I've always sort of referenced that in the sense that I think sometimes we're all so busy that if you ask me what I did sort of 3 weeks ago, I can't remember, but I want Gumball to stand out in people's memories of something they never forget. Yeah. And I think in your lives, you don't forget getting married or divorced or having children, and maybe get Gumball up there as alongside those as something you'll remember, but hopefully for a positive reason, Yeah.
So as a brand then, and as a business, was it a mindset that I'm going to definitely monetize this as a proper business, or was it more of a passion? And if it does turn into a business, extra bonus.
A bit of both. I mean, I entered it from the standpoint as well that I had no money back then. That, when I say I had no money, I had enough money to probably pay when I actually, from this, let's say the day of deciding, right, I'm going to do this rally, I'm still living off a bit of money I'd earned through modeling, and that was about it really, so, and, rent in London is not cheap and never has been. So I'd probably got enough to survive for a few months and then needed to kind of start paying the bills again. Yeah. And I came out of that, I budgeted that first rally. I'd got no experience in putting on events or parties, just attending them. And I hadn't really kind of budgeted properly. I'd gone more on the vision of what I was going to create, and was just all about creating that, and it without caring what it cost to a certain extent. And I wanted this trip around Europe for all these friends of mine driving in it to be so incredible that they wanted to do it again, or they wanted to support whatever else it was I wanted to get them to do, which meant hiring the most incredible hotels or chateaus, or the bit I benefit from, even on that very first one, was the different friends of mine that were musicians would play at the parties for free.
Yeah.
I didn't ask them to play for free. I just asked them to play, sort of thing. And because we were mates, they wanted to, and I think, you look back on that, and that's almost a bit of the sort of the missing link between the likes of the BMW parties I was going to, that if they wanted Jamiroquai to play, they'd have to pay him tens of thousands, whatever it was back then. Whereas if I asked him to play, he'd probably say, yeah, right, let's make a good party of it, sort of thing, So there was a little bit of a kind of an organic growth about what I was doing, that it was based on friendships and relationships. But I think, like I said, I needed to earn money. I had a passion and a vision to create a brand that could kind of combine my interests in cars and fashion and music and travel. So I had the idea and the game plan, but I guess I didn't really know at that point. I didn't really have a business plan at that point of how I would monetize it exactly. I just had this sort of drive to kind of put it on well and make everything I did incredible, with the hope and the thinking that the money would come. And obviously I did have some routes to money, so people did pay to enter the rally. Even the very first one, they paid £3,000 per car for the first one, which was basically me plucking a number 3,000 out of thin air, essentially. So the name Gumball 3000 came about because Gumball was a word that the artist Andy Warhol used for popular culture. It was like chewing gum. Gumball is a gumball, a chewing gum ball, and you sort of...
It hurt your jaw after a while. I've had that.
Yeah.
Because it's so thick.
But a gumball is like a reference to pop culture, that you chew it up and you spit it out. It's like the famous for 5 minutes. It's just a kind of it's a throwaway pop culture kind of thing.
Flash in the pan type thing.
Yeah, and but also the word gumball had been used, much like the word cannonball, for these races across America, that there's something that rolls from A to B. So it's like a road trip, a car race from A to B sort of thing, So that was where the word gumball came about. So it was always very much just kind of, thinking behind it was always this kind of popular culture kind of thing. The 3000 bit came about because I was starting this, and this first rally was in 1999, when everyone thought the world was going to end in 2000. Everyone thought computers were going to freeze, and the clock ticking over from 1999 to 2000 was like the end of the world, people were thinking. And so I'm like, I want to be a brand of the future. So forget the year 2000. I'm going to be I'm going to be 3000. So Gumball 3000, what it was, I like that reference of it, and kind of just coming out with a name that was a bit obscure, and it sounded fun. It didn't sound corporate. The 3,000 reference I also made into this trip being about 3,000 miles, so it was about a good distance. So it became this sort of magic number, essentially. And so, like I said, this first rally, I charged £3,000 per car. There was no kind of proper budget as to why it was £3,000. It didn't really cover the cost of the hotels, even, or whatever. Right,
it's had the 3,000 as well. It's almost like the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Tipping over from 1999 to the next millennium almost, So anyway, I put on this first one. I, had 55 cars paying $3,000 entry fee, and I managed to kind of raise probably a couple of 100,000 in sponsorship from fashion brands that I was modeling for still, or had relationships with. So like Diesel was the first sponsor that signed up to be a sponsor of Gumball.
Yeah.
Red Bull was the next sponsor that signed up, and Red Bull was a brand new drink that no one had heard of, and was available in one nightclub in central London. And I got to know them because I knew the guy that was trying to get it in that nightclub, so we got a few sponsors to pay a little bit, and I probably raised about sort of £400,000 or £500,000 to put on that first one. and it probably cost me about 600,000 to put on. So I'm down 100, and I got to claw it back somehow. So it's sort of, you know, like I said, it threw me into organizing the next one. But I did have this sort of vision that the money would come if I did, you know, put all the things on in the right way. And I guess, you know, that did kind of come true by the third year of the rally. So by the third year, we did it was getting more popular. You know, people more reading, knowledgeable about it from it being in magazines. The second rally was covered on Channel 4 over here as well. And then the third rally, we did a route from London to Russia and back to London. That we got a bunch of my skateboarding mates to come on that had started their own TV show in the States called Jackass.
Oh yeah.
And Jackass was doing really successful at the time, and so we were in, you know,
the film is hilarious.
Yeah, and so, you know, at the time I'm seeing them, they're just mates of mine really, and Johnny Knoxville's doing really well, and so we sort of sit down and say, let's make a special of all of us lot coming on Gumball. So
Yeah.
So they all came on the rally in 2001. We made it into the first ever Jackass movie. It was essentially an hour-long TV special for MTV in the US. And it was the highest watched show on MTV of 2001.
Wow.
And amazingly for me, they kept the Gumball logo on the top right-hand corner of the screen the whole time. And the next time I thought, you know what, 2002, I'm going to take Gumball to America. And I took it to America, and everyone knew it because of Jackass already. And on the back of those sort of that period of time and our awareness increasing, I signed a deal with Sony PlayStation for it to be made into a video game. I signed a deal with Hasbro Toys for it to be made into Top Trumps playing cards. A deal with Mattel Toys for it to be made into Hot Wheels models, you know, toy car models. And I think a deal around that time, probably sort of call it, you know, 5 to 10 deals that were game changers for me back then, you know, and game changers not only financially for me, but also for the brand as well.
Yeah, the brand equity.
Brand equity and the sort of I actually signed a 10-year deal with MTV after the Jackass show came out.
Incredible.
So for the next 10 years, Gumball was televised on MTV as either a 6-part series or like an hour-long special, utilizing MTV talents like Travis Barker on it one year from Blink-182 to BAM and all the other kind of Jackass spin-offs, them driving on it, and you know, it put Gumball in people's households.
Yeah, it's incredible. You mentioned I don't know why I thought of this, Red Bull. So when you say to someone Red Bull,
yeah, they
naturally say the first reaction is it's, you know, an energy drink. Well,
yeah.
I got a friend of mine who works fairly high up in Red Bull in Dubai, funny enough.
Okay.
And he said to me, when I say Red Bull, what do you think? I said, well, the energy drink.
Yeah.
He said, no, it's actually a media company.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is because Gumball, it originated from the rally.
Yeah.
But actually, it's more than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like you've gone into things like now the toy cars.
Yeah.
You've gone into multiple different areas. And
clothing line, we've got multiple license deals, merchandise. I mean, essentially, I guess one of the sort of I think I've cited this to you already, you know, since we've met a few weeks ago, but through licensed products and our own brand products, we sell in about over 40,000 shops around the world, sell Gumball merchandise.
That's amazing.
So, you know, when you look at it like that, then what's the rally? The rally is a small portion of it.
That was the birth of it, but now it's more things.
Yeah.
Look, we could talk loads about their successes, but I'm interested as a business person.
Yeah.
Some problems, setbacks, challenges. Talk me to a few of the ones you can talk about, and how did you overcome it?
I mean, you know, in a history of any company, you're going to go have some highs and lows. So I think I really struggled with there's been 3 sort of proper setbacks, a couple of real low points in our now 21-year history. So, you know, we're 21 years old now, which kind of makes me feel old, but also, you know, so in those early days, I think the first one is a quick one I'll reference to you because I've already talked about this period of Gumball. And I can look back on it now and tell a nice story about it. But obviously, if I'm really putting myself in my shoes at the time of when I was going through this, it was the biggest kind of nightmare. I didn't know what was going to happen, sort of thing. So
overwhelming, yeah.
So basically, the second year's rally, I organised as being another route around Europe. It was also starting and finishing in London, but it was a completely different route. It was all different countries, and like I said to you before, I wanted to make this kind of it was almost my fantasy route. It was sort of like, it was never trying to be like any other car event that existed or any other road rally that had ever taken place. It was something totally new and exciting, and could entice people to do it that weren't even into cars as well. So you'd get that sort of that, the film world and the music world and whatever, as well as car fans. So this second one, I decided, for whatever reason, we're going to start in London, and then we're going to drive a little bit, and then I'm going to hire these amazing aeroplanes that we can fly all the cars in to somewhere else and get off the planes and carry on driving. It had never been done before. No one had ever flown, multiple cars mid-rally. And again, I'm not quite sure how that got in my head at the time, but it did. And so I decided to hire these 3 private planes, the 3 biggest private planes you can ever imagine, 2 Russian Antonovs that could fit 55 cars on each plane.
Oh my God. That must have been ginormous.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I hired a 747 passenger jet, private jet, for 200 plus people. And that year's route, we set off from London, from Marble Arch, and the way I'd done the sort of the schedule of the rally was that people knew the rough route, which I found really kind of funny at the time, actually, that people now at this point, even though it's only the second rally, it kind of created a real buzz about it in London, that anyone that had sort of was a bit successful or sort of in that scene wanted to do it, and they would pay me the entry fee to do it, but they didn't care where it was going. So I didn't actually tell people that second year's rally where the route was. They just sort of got information about where they had to be at the start, and the basics sort of thing. Maybe the hotel the night before, and the start was going to be at Marble Arch. And so when they got to Marble Arch, and we were still pre the days of Gumball having any significant amount of fans, so it was really just the drivers and friends and family. And they set off, and one by one, as they set off, they get this little route card that would tell them where they're going, like the next destination, essentially. They have to get there however they can. And they all just assumed that they'd be driving to sort of Paris or France and going, to Calais kind of direction. And this little route card told them to go to Stansted Airport. And they were all like, what the fuck? What's going on? Why are we going to Stansted? Anyway, they get to Stansted, and I've hired, the runway at Stansted and closed it down. And for this event of us to arrive, and we had to drive our cars onto these 2 cargo planes, and this passenger plane was going to set off separate to it. Anyway, long story short, and then they were flying everyone to southern Spain, and they'd land in southern Spain and get off there, and that same day they drive up to Bilbao, and I'd hired the Guggenheim Art Museum for the party that night in Bilbao, and then the next day we're driving to Cannes, and I'd hired a yacht and it was during the film festival, have a big party there during the Cannes Film Festival, and so on. That was the route around Europe. So it was a really incredible kind of like jet set, rock and roll, fantasy. Anyway, I got a lot of money in for the second rally from entry fees. I'd increased the entry fee probably to $6,000 instead of $3,000. I got more sponsorship money in, but of course, maybe sort of, 100,000 or more had gone towards the previous rally. And then I'd obviously hired these airplanes and even better hotels, and hired museums and yachts and whatever. And it was kind of crazy.
Your burn rate must have been incredible.
I'd probably was getting in at the time sort of, I don't know, like now closer to $1 million that second year. But I think I'd spent about 2.5, so my maths wasn't great. But to put you into the picture of what I was going to say was, these aeroplanes. So the rally, actually, the closer the rally got, I'd booked these airplanes and everything. And obviously these airplanes even had to fly into Stansted to be there and ready and whatever. One of the companies even had to build a bespoke racking system, like a double-decker system inside the plane to load the cars, so the cars could just drive up and be on them. So even that had been a fairly significant investment into one of these cargo planes to even facilitate the cars. Anyway, I can't remember now off the top of my head how much these planes were, but call it something like, I don't know, like 300 grand each or something to rent them for this and build the racking system. And I'd probably paid them, several months in advance, like 10% deposit kind of thing to secure it and contract them in and all that. Anyway, and as it got close as the event taking place, I probably had to pay the full balance by, a week before or something like that. But as it came closer, I didn't have the money. I'd run out of money. Or what money I had, I knew I still had to kind of flow between multiple different kind of places instead of just using it all on this sort of balance of the airplanes. So anyway, I mean, I then spent that next sort of that week leading up to the rally of giving them sort of bullshit reasons why I hadn't got the money or I was going to have the money in. And thankfully, people did still owe me money. So there wasn't like a cash flow dried up. It was just sort of, it was just being in that situation at that time. And the fact that whilst cash flow hadn't dried up, I definitely didn't have enough money coming in that would have covered my outgoings at that time, And so anyway, what it came down to was that I managed to convince the plane company to actually fly the planes to London. And I managed to pay for the passenger plane in full. And put the pressure on in the sense that even on that day, I'd told them I was going to bring them cash, and we're talking like hundreds of thousands, and I'd probably brought them as much cash as I probably had at the time from entrance paying and whatever and stuff, but it was marginal, it was a fraction of what I owed them, and on the day I managed to kind of play it that the passenger plane was a separate company to the cargo plane, and I managed to get all the passengers on the passenger plane and get that plane to take off. So that was heading to Spain already, and then all their cars was left in Stansted on the runway, and these two cargo planes, and just put so much pressure on the company that they had to take off, or else this would be a major news story. And I'd got tons of celebrities on it, and I'd got like even daily news crews from over here were on it. Even at the time, there's a show called The Big Breakfast on Channel 4. They were even on the rally filming every day and whatever. And I was just like, this is the biggest disaster ever if these cars don't go, and this plane takes off and sends all these people to Spain and the cargo planes just stay in Stansted. So it was almost like me putting the onus on this company to like, please let them take off, it'd be a disaster for all of us if they don't. And anyway, they let it happen, and they flew there, and I promised to sort of pay them within days of when I got some money in. And at the time, the money wasn't flowing in fast enough. So the only asset I had at the time was a Lotus race car from the 1960s, which was worth tens of thousands, not probably still not enough of what I owed. But I remember getting back from the rally the rally went amazingly well that year, and it was fully rock and roll from start to finish. There were kind of, lots of damages throughout, but all the right sort of damages and great parties and everything. It was very, very cool. And I remember getting back to London after that, and like that very same day that I arrived back, there's a big truck comes to pick up my car, because this company is also owned by the Russians as well.
Right.
So I'm like, not only do I owe Russians hundreds of thousands, that they're coming to my house and they're taking my things, and they're, I'm not in a good position. And somehow I kind of pulled it round that these people that I owed the money to, I think this is a lesson in business as part of your kind of, your podcast and what you were sort of questioning, really. But so I was in a pretty dire situation of owing a lot of money to some, what could be probably some pretty heavy people. And I guess instead of running away from it, you just got to face everything. And, because I wasn't trying to pull a fast one. I did owe them. I did want to pay them and everything. And I just hadn't got the funds at that time. And so not only had they sort of taken my car and any assets that I sort of had, they wanted more. So I'm like, what I'm going to do is I want to fly and meet with the owners, which I did. And I decided that the next rally that we do, this is now looking towards the 2001 rally, I'm going to bring it to Russia. So, and then I asked them to help me organize it in Russia. So from it being a situation where I'm like on the back foot and really kind of in the shit, I turn it around to get these people that I owe all this to help me organize the next one and keep it going, keep on their good side essentially. And obviously over the course of the next next few months, when money does start coming back in, they're fully paid off and I get my Lotus back and everything's sort of back again. But I have to say that in that period of, at least sort of 3 or 4 months in 2000, I was probably thinking that my life was not going to last too much longer.
Yeah.
But somehow it came around. And I think, like I said, part of that was sort of partly a belief in what I was doing, that money was going to come at some point. And I've never tried to screw anyone over any business ever. If I've owed people, I've always paid them back. And it's just being honest with people and facing issues that you have in business, because it's far too easy sometimes to hide yourself and put your head in the sand. And when you owe money, to kind of try and avoid it in any way. And I think if you can just confront it head on, you not only get the respect of the person that you're dealing with, but you'll probably be able to work it out.
100%.
And I think that sort of having confrontation like that has probably helped me, enabled me to deal with bigger and worse situations moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it molds your resilience.
It does.
And I've had to face a few things like that in my lifetime, and I've been that person before when I was younger.
Yeah.
To try and bury your head in the sand.
Yeah.
And now definitely, I even do it day to day, even mini things where I look at something, a text comes up, and I don't purposely read it because I know what it's going to say, and I say to myself, "Stop being a pussy, read it, and deal with it."
Yeah.
And I think it just molds who you are.
Yeah.
But wow, what a story that was! Your I mean, the word that I would describe that segment right there is you're a fucking resourceful fella. I mean, I love hearing stories like that. I think you have
to be, and
being very resourceful.
Succeed, I think you have to be. And that doesn't matter what industry you're in, really. I don't know how long we're doing on this. We've probably gone over what we anticipated, but I have to say it out there, because obviously if there's people watching this that know Gumball already, I mean, 2007 was also a horrendous year for me because we had an accident on the rally, and sadly, a couple of days or a day or so after that accident happened, it was an elderly couple collided with one of the cars that was in the rally, and it wasn't a fast accident. It was what I would probably say is a genuine accident. That the one stage of the rally was through Macedonia, and was
it a Rolls Royce?
No. We got a Rolls Royce crash, but unfortunately no one's got hurt on that one, just the car. But no, this one in 21 years of doing this, this is like the only bad crash that we've sort of had, and
fatal.
Yeah, so basically a car on Gumball, which was actually with several other cars sort of driving together, and they're pretty bad roads through Macedonia, so you couldn't drive fast, and it was sort of country lanes almost, and a local farmer pulled out in his old sort of banger of a car as well, and the two collided, and in fact, the cars weren't that badly damaged, and neither were the people. But he died a day later from sort of shock.
Wow.
And really, to add to it, about 2 or 3 days later, his wife died from shock.
Oh,
so it was a horrendous thing, and his wife died from shock because he died, I think, sort of thing.
And was there a big investigation into it and stuff, or not really?
Yeah, there was at the time. It was a horrendous situation. It was one of those where sort of, from being riding the crest of a wave of success with the rally, and that 2007 rally was, in brand building terms, up to that point we were continuing to kind of grow rapidly. I mean, I'd just done a deal with Adidas and with Foot Locker, and we had a window display in every Foot Locker store around the world with Gumball and our Adidas collection of Gumball shoes, and that was a deal. We had like TV commercials, adverts with Exhibit, the rapper, in the adverts, and on the rally we had Exhibit and Jamiroquai again, and several other celebrities sort of representing the Adidas and Foot Locker sort of deal and everything, and it was a mega deal for us because it was literally putting Gumball at that time in sort of several hundred stores all around the world and prime locations, and as a result of the accident, within about 24 hours, Adidas pulled out of the deal and removed everything from every store and everything, and it was just a kind of it was one of those that actually, I think what got sort of helped me get through it or deal with it was the thing about Gumball was it was always about the rally itself, and everything was always about having fun. It was never out there to cause anyone any harm, any trouble. It was always about having, the rock and roll element to it was more the parties than the driving. It wasn't about putting your foot down and driving as fast as you can and being reckless and whatever. And just the sheer fact, like I said, on any one rally, you've got a mix of, you might have a Mini on the rally, you might have someone driving a Rolls Royce with a chauffeur as well as a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. So it was never about the racing. But I think, this accident just kind of hit the UK press at the time and just threw it all out there. Just, rich people, reckless, driving
making up a
crazy,
narrative, yeah.
just kind of just throwing everything at us sort of thing. And I think, obviously it was a really, really hard thing to deal with, and to know how to deal with it in the right way, to be respectful for what had happened, and also figure out what you do going forward. And I think, the thing of making it go forward in a positive way was simply kind of almost the support that people gave me and gave Gumball that were fans of it and participants that were in it. And then by this point, there'd probably been a couple of thousand people had done it by this point. So since the start, so it was a collectively, it was a big number of people and fans, and, we'd got MTV deal, TV deals and everything at this point. So, our awareness was out there, and we got a great fan base, and sort of everyone then knew what had happened. And I think everyone, apart from Adidas, sadly, sort of pulling out, the real sort of knee-jerk reaction of thinking maybe we'd been at fault sort of thing, which we really hadn't. Everyone else kind of looked at it sort of with better perspective and realized what we're doing is actually a fun thing. And
yeah.
I mean, even the countries that we were going to on that year's rally, and even the sort of where the accident happened, the cities by this point in the countries are supporting us and inviting us to bring the event there, because we're a fun spectacle, and we're doing music concerts now. And, it's sort of grown into just being this really fun sort of festival of cars and music that comes to different countries. So I think just the sheer positivity of what we did right outweighed this really sad accident. But of course, you can never get away from that accident. So it's something we just had to deal with. And I obviously questioned about whether it'd be the right thing to do the rally the next year. And I think I even put it out there to everyone that was involved still at the time, if we should. And collectively, everyone said we should, and they'll sort of support us. And then, I think from that point onwards as well, I kind of went the next steps of making it even more organized. Mm-hmm. And, and in a way, it also came at the time where our awareness was continuing to grow. So, from having an event in the city centre where, 2 years prior, we might have had 10,000 people, we were now getting 100,000 people. So just everything at that point sort of had to grow from a production standpoint and from an organization standpoint from us. So it almost made us mature overnight into realizing, I've been on this journey since 1999 to 2007 of just almost making it up as I go along, and the event organically getting bigger, to suddenly having this accident to think, we are now a business. We do have multiple people involved. We probably at that point had employed for the rally itself several thousand people on the rally every year across marshals and stewards and sound production and everything. And then through sponsors and license partners, we're part of an ecosystem that employs thousands of people now. And we're serious now. I can't just stop it and go away. It's what we do, so I think, we just almost matured overnight and just moved forward with a bit more kind of professionalism and a bit more organization. And not to say that the accident was at fault because we weren't organized enough. It was an accident that could have happened at any time and still could, but you've got to kind of almost just do all you can to reduce any risks, And so even now, if there's sort of country lanes on the rally, we try and sort of close them off completely, or do police escorts if we think the roads are dangerous in certain areas, or I don't know, just have a think about that a bit more now than we would have done.
Yeah.
But we got through it, and from a business standpoint, it's a dog eat dog world, and not to say that who was right and who was wrong or whatever, but when Adidas pulled out of this, very thankfully, we got a call out the blue from Puma, which is Adidas's rival. And if you know the story of Adidas and Puma, that they were brothers. And,
oh, right, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there was Adidas and Rudolf Dassler, so one was Puma and one was Adidas. And so that family was, one of the biggest German families and two biggest sportswear brands in the world at the time. And so anyway, when Adidas pulled out, I got a call out the blue from one of the heads of Puma saying, we want to sponsor you. So I signed a 5-year deal with Puma. And, they said, don't worry about what's happened. We'll support it. We'll make it even more organized and help you. And we believe in your brand and what you're doing. So
things happen for a reason.
Things happen,
Yeah.
Yeah.
This sort of bridges over into this next segment of the interview. Am I right in saying that you met your current wife, Eve, on the Gumball Rally?
I did, yeah.
Listen, when I first got to sort of know you on, not personally, but like looking at you as a profile, and like seeing who you were about, and obviously a brand, and then I found out you was married to Eve. I've got to be honest, I didn't put you two together.
Sure, yeah.
Now getting to know you, I understand exactly why she's married you.
Right.
But at first I thought, no, that kind of doesn't make almost sense because you're well-spoken businessman from England, from a very small village, and you're going out with a rapper. And for me, when I when I was getting
from
into
the hood in Philly,
when I think about Eve, I think about Rough Riders with DMX going on quad bikes or R6s or Dr. Dre.
Absolutely.
So the question I want to ask you then is, I haven't met many people that have married a rapper. What is that like? I mean, because you are. If I saw you down the street, I would know who you are because I'm into cars, I'm into business.
Right.
You're famous, but to a level.
Yeah.
But she is kind of super famous.
Yeah, totally.
So what's that like, going out with someone who's pretty super famous?
Well, it's, she's an amazing person. And very much like you said, I mean, if someone said to me, anytime before we met, you'll end up with a rapper from Philly, superstar, Grammy winner, whatever. I mean, I wouldn't have put myself with her, but anyway, that 2010 rally, it was it does lead on from what we were saying. So Puma sponsored the rally for 5 years, and each year would enter sort of celebrities as part of the Puma team in Gumball. And 2010, it was Eve in one of the cars that was for Puma, and Idris Elba, and I think Tyson Beckford, and a few other sort of celebrities that they'd brought along. The funny thing is with Eve and I is, I'd got divorced sort of 6 months before. And I got beautiful kids with my ex-wife, and now we're all happy families, all good friends and everything. But I was sort of, out of a divorce and sort of thinking this next rally, I'm going to be like young, free and single again and have some fun. And
you must have thought, touch.
The launch party of this rally was in London. The route that year was London to New York. We were basically driving London to Stockholm in Sweden, and then Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Stockholm. And then we were using these airplanes again that I've used now many times since, where we flew about 3 of these planes now and a passenger plane, and flew all the cars to North America, to Boston, and then we were doing a loop around Canada and whatever, and ended up in Times Square that week. And it's an incredible route. And anyway, the night before the rally sets off from London, we do the launch party of that year. And part of the deal that Puma had offered me was that Eve would do a performance at the launch party. And it was a great lineup of artists and whatever. We got Cypress Hill and Eve and Exhibit playing that night.
Amazing.
And anyway, arriving at that launch party was always like a red carpet and the press wall and all that sort of stuff. And randomly, I happened to arrive exactly the same time that Eve is on the red carpet, standing there with all these photographers flashing away and news crews interviewing her and whatever. She was one of the big celebs on the rally, that year. And because I've just arrived and I'm the organizer of it and everything, and walk around the red carpet, all the press say, Max, Eve, let's get a picture together, sort of thing. So the very first second that we ever meet, there's a photo of it, you know, that we've now got framed.
I bet that's iconic. I was going to say.
She gave it me as a present a few years ago, this sort of photo, you know, which is actually like the very second that we met, which is kind of crazy. And so we literally sort of, you know, introduced each other there and then on the carpet. And then later in that evening at the party, I go up on stage occasionally and introduce the artists that are performing or whatever's going on a little bit. And, you know, I have to introduce Eve, and she comes on stage, and, you know, I've obviously heard her music before, but I don't think I'd ever seen another female rapper ever perform live. And I think I was just mesmerized. I think even like watching her that night, I was like, oh my God, she's just incredible, you know. And I think because we'd sort of connected on the red carpet and then I'd introduced her, I think after she'd performed, we sort of talked a little bit, you know, and sort of, you know, and then throughout that week, we sort of hung out a bit more at the parties, and it's all busy, obviously, you know, but there was an energy and a connection between us, you know, and I think, you know, we ended up, you know, by the end of that rally week, after flying back to London from New York, I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to go to see her in LA. So I flew straight back to LA, and we got together, and we've been together ever since, you know. And so it was kind of like a real passionate kind of, you know, we were just thrown in this random situation together. I would never have met her probably before, you know, any other way. And yeah, it was really sort of strange because I sort of, like I said, I knew her and her music, but suddenly I'm going to sort of big events with her and realizing how famous she is in America in particular. And we're in LA most of the time, or in New York and whatever. It's just really surreal. I mean, you know, very, very surreal. And her sort of, obviously her, you know, friends group in the industry or other artists she's collaborated with or worked with. It's a who's who, you know. It's literally from Prince to Pharrell to everyone you can think of.
She's like
Dre
super
to
connected.
Ben Stefani to whatever, you know. And so it's just sort of, I think, you know, I think, you know, I probably only think about that sort of thing when I'm asked about it. I think we just sort of connected on such a personal, normal level that, you know, obviously, you know, neither of us were into each other because of what we did. You know, we were just into each other because we got on really well. And just in a way, our life has always been quite funny in the sense that people think that, you know, we must always be kind of doing amazing things and going to the right parties and whatever. And I think probably, you know, you know, we've been together 10 years now, married for 6 of those years now. And, you know, we're almost like the boring couple now because we just want to hang out at home or do stuff with family and whatever. And I think, you know, it's almost like I've got this kind of Gumball world that occasionally puts me in the limelight when the rally's on and whatever. And she's got this other world that almost every time she steps out the front door, she's in this world. Yeah. You know, when she's moved to London, or when she first started coming to London, and when, you know, we first living together over here, I mean, if you would go to the local supermarket, people would be like, that's it, you know, and pointing and like, that's not her, that can't be. And people come up to her all the time saying, do you know, you look really like Eve, the rapper, you know, and it's just like, and it was Eve, the rapper. But because people wouldn't expect her over here, it's really kind of, it's been really funny. But also
in Waitrose somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, for her, it's been quite nice because it is away from stuff. Because if she's in LA or New York, then of course everyone knows her. And I, you know, it's one of those things that obviously I've never been out with anyone before that's sort of famous like that. So you just realize how you have to tackle the world differently when you have that level of fame, that you can't, unfortunately, just
switch it off. Yeah.
And you can't just go to the local corner shop and whatever. You can, but you've also got to expect that someone might now want a picture with you, and, you know, and you've got to be the person they want you to be as well. You can't be grumpy or whatever. And I don't know, it just feels a lot. Like sometimes just friends sort of say to me, oh, you know, I've got something going on, you know, you and Eve, love you and Eve to come, you know, and whatever. And Eve's like, are they going to be pressed there, whatever? Because it's like, you know what, she will have to work. She can't just go and enjoy it and be anonymous in a way. If she's going out to an event, no matter what it is, and people are going to take pictures of her and whatever, those pictures now, especially in recent years through social media, are going to end up places. Yeah. And I just think, in a way, it's really hard when people are very famous, and you realize why some very famous people become more reclusive the older they get, and are very different characters behind the, when they're home to their sort of personal life, because it almost forces you to be like that.
Yeah.
It's sort of, I wouldn't want to be recognized where you go. There's a part of you that wants it because you want the recognition for what you do.
Yeah.
But there's a part of it that just actually realizes that, when I'm just filling up my car with petrol, or I'm just like popped out to the corner shop, do I really want to have a conversation with someone? And
it's like the chase of becoming, let's say hand in hand rich and famous. But then when you get there, it's almost like actually now, maybe not the money side of it, or the money side is you become more of a giver, charity, and all that kind of stuff, and you're giving it away a lot more. Yeah. But famous, you want to go back. You've tasted it. Now you want to go back to normality. Yeah. One thing which resonated with me, and listen, not on the same scale, but doing podcasting, I've interviewed fairly famous people now, and the person I thought I was going to interview because of the profile, when I actually get them sitting there and chatting, they're not a different person, but you see them as one person to the. It's almost like an alter ego almost with the famous side of it, and I totally respect what you're saying now.
Yeah. So many people say to Eve when they meet her, when we're out together and they've had a bit of a conversation, got to know her a little bit, like how nice she is and whatever.
How normal, maybe.
I think they're probably expecting her to be the pit bull in a skirt rapper the whole time.
Yeah.
Aggressive rap, and the whole kind of, like you said, Rough Riders scene. What do they expect? She's going to be kind of, I don't know. They expect something else sometimes, and she's thankfully, far nicer than they imagined she was going to be.
Yeah. So last segment of the interview, if you've got time, of course. This is the part I'm really intrigued with as well. So look, you've had a very amazing life so far, and no doubt, over the next few years it's going to get even better. And I hope I can be a small part of that with the racing and stuff.
Too, yeah.
And also hopefully being your art dealer.
Yeah.
So you've amassed a great company, good amount of wealth, life experience and stuff. I always like to ask business people, what do you typically invest into? Now, I know art, obviously there's going to be businesses and property and stuff.
Yeah.
Why did you get into art? I know your dad was in art. I know you studied it, had a passion.
Yeah.
People buy to enjoy, people buy to invest, and also buy to collect. I guess you're across all three. So when you buy something, is it, I want to make money from that, or I want to enjoy it, but also know I can make money from it in 5 or 10 years?
It's definitely the latter of that. It's I buy it because I like it still, but I am doing it from the perspective that it's going to go up in value, or I'm hoping it will go up in value.
Yeah.
But I think, the thing with art is as well is that there's obviously, there's so many thousands of artists out there, and sort of sectors of art, types of art, periods of art,
genres,
everything, and I think it'd be a minefield that if you're not fully understanding of it, you get lost very quickly, and it can be not appealing to a lot of people to maybe invest in because they just don't know enough about it. But I think I've always been, like you can see from any event that I put on or anything that I try and do, I really kind of go into these things sort of learning as much as I can about something. So like when I'm buying a work of art or, the chances are I've learned a lot about that artist. I know enough about them to give me the reason to sort of support them and to invest in that piece and I think it is funny when you mentioned, because my dad's an artist. I did grow up sort of getting dragged around art gallery to art gallery as a kid and learning without really realizing I was learning. So I had a really good knowledge of just sort of all the sort of the big artists of the last few centuries without actually studying any of that. I think I just sort of picked it up. So I'd probably be able to kind of reference, I don't know, impressionists to Dutch masters to whatever without ever really studying them. Just that was really kind of just because of getting grown up, with someone who is a full-on artist in my life, really. But I do also remember sort of thinking that when I would go around galleries occasionally when I was older, and even when I was at St. Martin's, that I don't know how to describe it almost, but I almost feel like I didn't know what I liked at that point in terms of which artists I liked or which types of art I liked. And I wasn't talking about buying any art then. I was just talking about, if I was going to go to galleries and see, I don't know which galleries I would go to. I don't know which artists I wanted to look at. You'd end up probably going occasionally if you, if I got friends in town, I'd probably, and you do that sort of, take them on the tourist spots of London. I'd probably go to the obvious, the Tate Gallery or something like that occasionally and walk around there a bit, but still not really know what I liked myself. And then I'd say probably in the early 2000s was the first time I started buying anything myself. And I guess, what I bought back then probably really kind of stems still from the culture that I felt I was part of, which was that skateboard graffiti culture kind of world.
Yeah.
There were a lot of friends that were skaters that were graffiti writers, artists as well. And some of them getting a bit more successful.
Did you say that's your favourite genre then, the street art?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think it's the only one that I feel part of and feel I fully understand and I'm in the era of as well.
And then probably had some influence with your business because like you said, it overlaps with music, fashion, definitely. Art. You even said that you have Futura.
Yeah.
Futura 2000, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. 2000 on your rally, and we've had a few pieces here, and he's definitely someone that I would like to work with in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, street art I think is really, really cool. So I know you mentioned about you own Banks's. Any other cool street artists you got in your portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, I've when I get into something, I really get into something. So like, I'm definitely a collector of multiple things, not just art as in paintings type art. I've got
sculptures and...
Well, across the art world, I've got sculptures and everything, but I've also got a collection of, several thousand sneakers. I've got a collection of several hundred skateboard decks, which are works of art to me as well. I've got a collection of, I mentioned at a very early age when I was sort of 10, 11, 12, something, I BMX rode, and in recent years or in the last sort of, last 20 years of having a period of when I've had sort of money to enjoy things that I want, I've gone and bought all those bikes I never had as a kid. I've probably got over 100 BMX frames from that period that are all hung on a wall as an art installation. I collect Formula One drivers' helmets. I've got about 50 of them of drivers that have all won Formula One World Championships wearing those helmets. And now I collect cars and motorbikes and art, And I really, it's probably a bit of a problem, actually, the amount of stuff that I collect. Because I'm not so good at selling it. But the good thing is that I do sell things occasionally. But I've been very fortunate that a lot of pieces and things that I have bought have gone up significantly.
That's great.
But in terms of sort of the street art graffiti world, I mean, I've sort of lots and lots, really supported Banksy from the first sort of pop-up exhibitions he sort of ever had. Amazingly looking, seeing where his career is now, but I think back on it, the first few Gumball parties that I did around 1999, 2000, 2001, I'd always hire big sort of derelict buildings in central London, sometimes even around here, and turn them into like these party spaces. And for a few of those, had Banksy paint the insides. Wishing now, of course, I'd got those walls and
kept them.
Could take these walls down, but of course I didn't. But it's just nice to think that he's been part of the Gumball's growth and the Gumball's world a little bit. But from buying a lot of his in those early years don't think I can afford to buy any of his now. His prices are so crazy. But I don't know. I've got about 1,500 paintings of street artists sort of work, and that is across almost most of the key names, you know, from Futura to Shepard Fairey to Jose Parla, JR, Fail, Ben Ein, Tristan Eaton, all of those. And then in the last sort of, probably the last 10 years, 5 to 10 years, where I've been fortunate, I've been earning a bit more money, and I've sort of managed to dip into kind of buying some sort of, let's say, more kind of the contemporary art world.
Yeah.
But the artists that I really like and buy that are not really straightforward, sort of from that street culture world, the ones that are in the sort of the flashy galleries and in the Tates already and whatever, there are artists like Christopher Wool and Pierre Soulages and Frank Stella and you know, artists that are all of the last sort of 50 years really. But actually, when I look at their work, most of their work to me is very, very similar to street art. You know, there's an artist called Christopher Wool that I love his stuff, but it's very kind of, I almost describe it as like, it's punk and it's spray cans and it's sort of, it's, you know, he wasn't, I don't think, ever a street artist or graffiti artist, but it's a very much a blur between those worlds.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is about that, but you know, when I look at these pieces, I mean, there's a new artist, not a new artist, but an artist I've only recently sort of been buying. It's called Adam Pendleton, an American artist, and again, really powerful kind of spray paint drips and aggressive looking kind of work, very sort of similar to this in the way of powerful kind of brush strokes and whatever. And I think, I don't know what it maybe I've sort of seen my dad do that over the years, and that part of that has sort of influenced what I like and what I don't like. But yeah, when you look at my collection, when you come over and see Gumball at some point, there's a lot of works there. You know, you'll see the links of the sort of the similar sort of raw style, I think.
Yeah. I got obviously to know you through my friend Lewis Burton, and obviously the reason why you sort of come here initially was, and I don't want this to seem like a plug or like it's staged, but Richard Hamilton. Yeah. So like, I'm always intrigued, like people that who kind of find us through like networks. What sort of stood out from, let's say, Richard Hamilton's work that which you find quite intriguing?
I think,
or his story, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that you know, you and I have got a mutual friend in New York, or probably a couple of mutual friends in the industry. That it's a friend of mine, Mike Malbon, that's been buying,
great guy,
or collecting, or being given, or whatever it was from Richard Hamilton over the years, because they knew each other in New York, and I think I probably had a first introduction to his work through Mike, and obviously the more I looked into it, sort of realizing that actually Hamilton's part of the whole kind of Keith Haring and Basquiat, and you know, sort of almost actually Futura, almost on the periphery of those. Well, they're the same sort of peer group in New York. You know, they're all amazing. They've all got their own styles. They've all incredible characters and personalities, which is also kind of, like you say, the Hamilton story. I mean, you know, he's a crazy character, you know, but I think all of those are that we've mentioned. They've all got their kind of, and they've all been sort of, you know, they're all part of that sort of New York graffiti street culture kind of world. Yeah. That, you know, amazingly, it's only been in the last sort of, you know, decade or so that Basquiat has sort of bridged that jump from that sort of street art world into the sort of just the art world in general, and is hitting the highest prices of any art in the world, sort of thing, you know. And Keith Haring has also kind of, you know, been part of the establishment art world for a long time, and so I guess part of me also questions as to why Richard Hamilton and even Futura haven't really kind of been celebrated in quite the same way at the moment as the likes of Basquiat, you know, because I think, like I said, all their work is very different. They've all been pioneering in their own way. You know, you can see that they're like I said, they've all got their own creative styles and had their own journeys that they should all be up there. And I do, you know, believe he was an amazing painter, and I'd love to have one of his pieces at some point. Yeah.
Well, I feel it's only a matter of time that in the next 5 years, 10 years, not saying he's going to be worth like 110.5 million like the Jean-Michel Basquiat, but it's only a matter of time before it's going to go from here to here. Yeah, and we've definitely been a big part of it. Obviously, at the Saatchi Gallery, we've done a show. Yeah. There's a big Richard Hamilton experience taking place next year. And also the Rizzoli book. You know, Rizzoli done a book for, I think, even Banksy, definitely for Cause and also for Jean-Michel Basquiat. They're about to do one for Richard Hamilton. So all of these foundations are set, and it's only a matter of time before it's got to go up a level or two. And I think a lot of collectors, investors know that. And also the last point, what I've realised, dealing with a few people in this sector for the last 7 years, some people that kind of missed the boat with Jean-Michel Basquiat and Keith Haring, who have gone, damn, I wish I could go back in time and buy one at 20, 30, 40,000. They now look at Hamilton and say, I'm not going to miss this one. I'm going to jump onto this one because it's got to go that way.
Definitely. I mean, the art world is one that always astonishes me in the prices of it, because, you know, it's one of those worlds that is not, there's no regulation, you know, regulatory body. There's no, you know, insider trading or anything like that the banking financial world has. I mean, art is sort of based on a combination of things. Why works start selling for the silly prices they do, but when they start selling for the silly prices of the sort of the tens, 20s, hundreds, millions, there's no method to that really. It's just a bit of craziness. It's amazing if you can be part of that and you've got some works that go up like that. But I think just the likes of Hamilton, I think, like you said, you know, they deserve to be recognized alongside those peers of theirs that are getting recognized and have been recognized for a while now.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's probably a shame that he probably won't, you know, didn't benefit from the money that his works will probably make whilst he was alive. But in the next few years, it's going to go up, isn't it?
100%. Yeah. Max, where can we find you if people want to find you?
Well, you can't.
On your Instagram?
On my Instagram, Mr. Gumball 3000.
All right, lovely. This is a question that I ask all my guests. I've got a saying, which is, be happy, never content. I even just built my own gym recently, and I've got it plastered up on the wall, and it's a reminder of my ethos, the way I should live every single day. Yeah. If I were to ask you, be happy, never content, what does that mean to you?
I guess, you know, like we've touched on a little bit, you know, we get one go at this life. So, you know, why miss it? You know, live it, try and enjoy it and be happy and take it all in. It's an incredible life if you live it in the right way. And you know, don't rest on your laurels or be lazy. Don't be content over stuff that, or certainly don't complain at stuff you haven't tried, or be scared to do stuff. So, like I said, just that's more my motto of just sort of living life to the full.
Good stuff. Thank you very much for this podcast. One more thing before we wrap up.
Yeah,
your wife's had a birthday recently, and it's coming up to Christmas. So I've got you something.
Oh wow.
So this is the nightlife book from our Saatchi show.
Amazing.
And you said you like skate decks.
I do.
I've got you...
oh, incredible.
The triplet. So just put it out here.
That is very cool. I saw this on your Instagram recently.
Here you go. And that's the book to go with it. So my homie from Dart Circle, guy called Aaron. No problem. Aaron helped design this. This is a photographer called Frank Palela. Player. I actually interviewed him. This is his nightlife book, but it's been recreated by Aaron. I thought, you know what? You've been in the skate world. You love an art. This is for you, for both of you.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
That's really kind of you.
No problem, Max. Right, thank you everyone for listening. Please go to my YouTube, look at my Instagram. You can find this in the next couple of weeks, this episode. Or actually, he's going to be out when I say that. So anyway, I lost my train of thought there. Big shout out to my branding partner, the Woods Co-op. Check them out for the CBD. They're experts in that field. And remember, be happy, never content. Nice one.
Thank you.
Cheers.